Hello, everybody. Welcome to Shadow at Night, Monday, October 21st, 2024. Intrigue in British Columbia. What kind of an election was that anyway? Where you get one party getting one more seat than the other party, and the third party getting two seats, meaning they have the keys to the car. They have the deciding swing votes. The Green Party. Who votes green? Well, you know what? That's not really a stupid question anymore. It should be, but it's not. The New Brunswick election happened tonight, and believe it or not, the Greens got a significant amount of the electorate to vote for them somehow, some way. I don't understand. Is the liberal green agenda not enough for you people? You want to go full green Marxist? I don't get it. I've been to BC. It's a beautiful province, but the people there, I'm not going to say all of them. As a matter of fact, half of them, it looks like, are dedicated to this idea that climate change is an actual thing. Man-made climate change is an actual thing. And somehow, even if it is, that Canada has a lot to do with it. Forgetting the fact that Canada has got billions and billions of trees, making it, actually, some scientists say, a carbon sinkhole. We're not putting any carbon into the atmosphere. But then you get other scientists saying, well, if you keep dropping the carbon levels, the entire planet's going to die because the plants won't be able to breathe and the plants would give us oxygen. And so it's a big, complicated. Ultimately, I don't like when things become politicized, and they have become politicized. Obviously, everything has become politicized, especially over these past 9 years or so, at least in Canada, since Justin Trudeau has been prime minister. Now, there are rumblings that he may be stepping down because of this pushback from his caucus, which we hear is numbering at least 50 now. Last week, we heard 20 MPs were upset with Trudeau and they wanted to talk to him at the caucus meeting on Wednesday. Then it was 30, then back down to 20, then back up to 30. And today, we heard the left-wing corporate media talking about the possibility of 50 of these liberal MPs who want to see Trudeau step down. Now, when you've got 50 in a caucus of 153, you know that in the next non-confidence motion, Mondays, I hate when people blame Monday for their complete and total brain fogs. But anyway, the next non-confidence vote, if 50 MPs, they don't even have to vote against Trudeau, even 30 of them. If they just sit on their hands and abstain, I have no vote, then the Liberals go down. If the Bloc and the Conservatives vote together, and I hate seeing the idea of Conservatives voting with the Separatist Party, but you got to do what you got to do to bring this country back to at least some semblance of normalcy, considering everything we've been through these past 9 years. That would be nice. There's a lot of people saying, oh, be careful, Pierre Poilievre. He's one of them. He's one of them. That may be, but everything I hear this man say leads me to believe the opposite. He may be surrounded by some of these people in his office. People like John Baird, we've heard about him and his World Economic Forum ties, and also Michelle Rempel Garner, who is the Conservative MP from Calgary Nose Hill, who apparently knows a little bit more about this Winnipeg biolab situation than most of the other MPs sitting in the House, although I don't know how. I've heard rumblings of that from my Ottawa connections. Anyway, that aside, we hear she is still on the website of the World Economic Forum as a young global leader. So yeah, there's going to be bad seeds in every party, but we know that the Liberal Party of Canada is controlled by the World Economic Forum, the United Nations, and the globalist cabal. I don't think the Conservative Party is controlled by them. They may have elements of them in it, but I don't believe they're controlled by them. That's my take on it. And of course, there's going to be people going, PPC, and that's fine. You want to go ahead and vote PPC in the next federal election, fill your boots, that's great. I don't believe that Maxime Bernier has a snowball's chance in hell of ever getting a seat in the House of Commons. He's tried 3 times, him alone. And pretty much, he is the party. I'm sorry, but that's just the way it goes. Max Bernier, if he stepped down from the leadership of the People's Party of Canada, there would not be a People's Party of Canada. Anyway, let's continue on here. The Shadow at Night live stream is brought to you by Canada Nano Silver, Canada nanosilver.com. With these fantastic products, the facial serum, the immune gummies, the naked bandage, the Nano Silver gel pump, Nano Silver liquid in multiple strengths. You've got the Recover cream, which helps you if you had a weekend of playing pickup hockey or working in the yard. You strained yourself. You need some Recover muscle cream. Silver lozenges, silver moisture spray, skin cream in multiple scents, the natural sinus relief, of course, the toothpaste and multiple flavors. All of these products. You're going to see these products actually at the Health and Wellness Expo in Saskatoon this coming weekend, Saturday from 10 until 6 o'clock, and then Sunday from 10 until 5 o'clock. The 2024 Saskatoon Wellness Expo. Canada Nano Silver will be there in booth 38. If you're in the Saskatoon area and you want to go check the show out, use promo code 24038 for your free complimentary tickets at universe.com/Saskatoon Wellness 24. It's going to be at Prairie Land Park in Saskatoon this weekend, the Health and Wellness Expo in Saskatoon. Canada nanosilver.com. Again, that is Canada nanosilver.com. All right. I know I've talked about this at length before, ad nauseum before, but I need to talk about it again because people seem confused. As a matter of fact, I posted something on social media over the weekend that it escaped me. It just blasted right past me. But 3 weeks ago, according to CTV News Edmonton, City Council there just completely passed the 15-minute city plan. And they call it the 15-minute city plan in their story. You can go look that up. Just type into a Google search even. You can use Google. You don't have to use Brave. Use Google. CTV, Edmonton, 15-minute city, and the story will come up. Boom, just like that. They passed it. Where's the resistance in Edmonton? I mean, you guys know what's going on with these things. And I know that Edmonton did have a bit of a resistance last year, but that calmed down rather quickly once these city councilors started calling people nutbags and weirdos and extremists and conspiracy theorists. So anyway, there is this town called Morris in Manitoba. It's about a half an hour, maybe 35 minutes south of Winnipeg on Highway 59. It's about 2,000 people. It's a very small farming community. And coming up on Thursday, November 7th, and we caught this on the X page of the town of Morris today. On Thursday, November 7th, the town of Morris Council will hold a public hearing to receive feedback on the new development plan bylaw, Grow Morris, it's called. The plan will guide future land use and development within the town of Morris. It provides policy direction for land use and zoning, transportation and parking, pedestrian mobility, and streetscape improvements. So transportation is a problem in a one-stoplight, 8-street town. That's actually what they're trying to tell us here. A copy of the development plan and supporting material can be accessed online at the URL above. So that's mrichardassociates.ca. I believe this is a city planning architecture firm based in the city of Winnipeg. So here it is. This is the plan that the town of Morris wants to implement, and they need your input, my friends. Their first hearing, by the way, was back in May, and I understand that not many people attended that. So Thursday, November 7th, town council offices in the Stampede buildings, I think, just off the main drag. I mean, there's only the 8 streets in Morris. It's not going to be hard to find. And I know there's people from Morris and surrounding community probably watching this right now going, Shadow, come on. Say, look, you guys know how small your town is. But you absolutely have to have a sustainable transportation and land use policy in place. So the town of Morris, it's called Grow Morris, in the plan here, community plan here, 2025-2050. Does that sound familiar? And people are asking now, they're starting to ask questions like, well, what does this mean? What does this 15-minute city mean anyway? Well, why don't you go and read all about it? But the flowery language is part of the problem. Actually, it's the entire problem because they're not reading between the lines. Well, we want to help you sustain your community through equity, diversity, inclusion. So here's the city council, the project steering committee members. And by the way, I saw a picture of the town council of Morris today, and I was having a rough time picking out the woke members. I mean, there doesn't look like a woke member on that council. But then again, maybe the CAO, maybe the town manager is one of these wokies. Maybe it's a bureaucrat. Maybe it's the deep state. That's how they're getting these things passed. And remember that these plans exist in over 400 municipalities across the country. We're going to get into that in just a couple of seconds. Oh, and by the way, before I continue, this coming weekend, Ken Drysdale, Ken Lee, and myself will be at a meeting in LaSalle, Manitoba, to talk about the Winnipeg Plan 2050. Okay, so if you want to come and see us, it's going to be between 1 and 4 o'clock at Kingswood Golf Course in LaSalle this coming Saturday afternoon between 1 and 4 o'clock. Be happy to see you there. All right, so here's the table of contents. Town of Morris story, Grow Morris vision. Oh, complete community. That's on page 18. So let's go down to it's 2,000 people. It's one stoplight. It's maybe 12 streets. Okay, I'm not doing it justice. This is what Morris looks like from above. That's Morris. Right. That's the entire town. Now, we don't need to go through the history of Morris. We know that they have the second largest stampede in Canada, which is cool. It's called the Manitoba Stampede. It runs every July, or is it June? In the town of Morris. They have this big fairgrounds down there. It's really fun, actually, down in Morris. The economy is based on agriculture, Grow Morris vision, plan purpose, general principles. Generally speaking, Morris is one of those places you stop for gas on the way from Fargo or Grand Forks or Minneapolis, if you've gone on that drive from Winnipeg over the weekend. Vision, community pillars. Complete community. Here it is. All right. Morris will be comprised of safe and active streets. It's a town of 2,000 people, for goodness sakes. And blocks that offer various types of housing that welcome all current and future residents. Oh, let's remember that our Premier Wab Kinew here in Manitoba has agreed to welcome 8,000 refugees in the coming weeks or months. Where are they going to go? This might be one of their locations. Smart, responsible growth and development will be encouraged by the town, from intensifying and building up Main Street to establishing new types of residents across town. New types of residences. What are they talking about? Oh, yeah, right. Those 600 square foot condominiums that everybody is so scared of but does nothing about. With a common vision for the future, the community will guide development in a manner that maximizes the use of existing infrastructure and municipal resources. A balance between new development and redevelopment will ensure a more diverse range of housing options are provided that enable long-term residents or returning residents to age in place while allowing new households to take root in the community. So they do use the catchphrases. Now, this is a 77-page report, obviously. We're not going to go through the entire thing here, but they do use the United Nations World Economic Forum catchphrases: diversity, equity, sustainability, all of that. So again, for you people in the Morris area, November 7th at your town council offices, they're having this gathering, and we would like you to go. We would like you to go and ask about it, and maybe arm yourself with some information first. Maybe come to LaSalle this weekend, find out exactly what, because all of these plans that are being launched across the country, they're the same thing. And where do they come from? Well, look at this. This is the World Economic Forum website, weforum.org. And this story goes back over 2 years, 2.5 years. The surprising stickiness of the 15-minute city. Stickiness? Surprising? Urbanism trends come and go, but the 15-minute city framing of walkable, mixed-use urban development is a lot more than a fad. The historical roots of the 15-minute city are connected deeply with the current moment, one we will be living with for a long time to come. And here it is. As climate change and global conflict cause shocks and stresses at faster intervals and increasing severity, the 15-minute city will become even more critical. So here it is, guys. This is it right here. The obvious yet incomplete answer is the pandemic. Oh, wait a minute. Hold on here. For longtime urbanists, the 15-minute city seemed merely repackaging the historic urban pattern of development, walkable, mixed-use districts, old wine, new bottle, as the saying goes. But for a new framing to ignite a global urbanism movement, clearly there's more going on. The obvious yet incomplete answer is the pandemic. Would Paris's mayor, Anne Hidalgo, have pushed for progressive urban design without this framing? Undoubtedly. But with COVID-19 and its variants keeping everyone home, the 15-minute city went from a nice to have to a rallying cry. Meeting all of one's needs within a walking, biking, or transit distance was suddenly a matter of life and death. Oh, why? Well, I can't speak for any other country on the planet, but what I can tell you is that Justin Trudeau's federal government is offering incentives for people to go green. Corporations, NGOs, anybody across the country, corporately, you get incentives for going green, for trying to go green anyway. And of course, there's the carbon tax as well. So who is behind all of this? Well, it's the Partners for Climate Protection, at least in Canada. And by the way, you guys, as you know, because I've gone over this over and over and over again, but it bears repeating, the Partners for Climate Protection is part of ICLEI, which is part of the United Nations, and this is listed on the website of the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. Partners for Climate Protection. Join this national network of 400 plus municipalities and learn how to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and act on climate change. So here they are. The Partners for Climate Protection program is a national network of over 400 municipalities with the shared goal of taking action against climate change and reducing local greenhouse gas emissions in order to provide more effective and dedicated support to PCP members across Canada. So Partners for Climate Protection equals ICLEI equals United Nations. And in every plan that I have seen rolled out across the country, this is involved. The language of ICLEI, the Partners for Climate Protection, and the United Nations has got their hands all over the language of these 2050 plans. Every single one of them, which means to me that these local politicians are implementing plans that come from the United Nations, and they're not locally grown. They're not thought out locally. Do we even need these plans? Do you need this plan, this sustainable community development plan, in a 2,000-person community like Morris, Manitoba? And this is even more frightening. Look at this. The Federation of Canadian Municipalities website goes on with the global covenant of mayors in Canada. Covenant? It sounds like some kind of a religious group, a covenant. Global covenant of mayors in Canada. Look at them all. The global covenant for mayors for climate and energy. All a bunch of wokies there. It's a collaboration between the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, ICLEI Canada, the Global Covenant of Mayors Secretariat, and the International Urban Cooperation Project, supported by funding from the European Union. The initiative combines two leading domestic climate programs, the Partners for Climate Protection program and the Building Adaptive and Resilient Communities, or BARC program, with the leading global climate programs. Together, we can further advance Canadian local climate action by adding value, opportunities, and streamlined support for members. It's all about this climate change nonsense, you guys. And what I said about Poilievre earlier, in regards to not being part of the World Economic Forum and the Club of Rome and the Bilderbergs and all of that stuff, I stand by that. But he certainly hasn't done enough to stand in the face of this climate change narrative, which has swept the country. And John Rustad actually did in British Columbia. And he almost won that election. We're going to get into that BC election in just a couple of minutes. But look at this global covenant of mayors Canada and the showcase cities: Nanaimo, Courtenay, Moncton, I can't pronounce this, Ucluelet, I don't know how to say that, Fredericton, Mount Pearl, New Glasgow, Burlington, Hamilton, Oakville, London, Brampton, Orangeville, Ottawa, Kitchener, Kingston, Windsor, Huron-Kinloss, Rivière-du-Loup, Provost, Laval, Bay St. Paul, Candiac, Beaconsfield. And that's only the mayors who were pictured here. This covenant continues to grow all across our country. So, again, if you want to go to that meeting Thursday, November 7th, this will be the second and final public hearing before they pass this nonsense in Morris, Manitoba. As for the rest of you who are watching this show from all points across the country, I strongly recommend that you type in because there's a deadline, there's an obvious deadline on these plans being implemented, or at least rubber stamped by the respective government the province they happen to be in. And I think that deadline is January the 1st. So if you guys all across the country watching this want to know if your city, your town, your municipality is somehow involved with the Partners for Climate Protection and the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, it's very simple. All you need to do is type in the name of your city, town, or municipality in a Google search bar and then write Plan 2050. And the plan should come up in one of the first two items, first or second. It'll be right there. And you can go through it at your leisure. Read through it. Sustainability, inclusion, diversity, all of that stuff will be included. And I've been asking, where do these plans come from? Who's writing these plans? Well, obviously, we know of one architecture firm or city planning firm in Winnipeg that's doing it. But we haven't yet been able to pin down who else is putting these plans out there, but they're all pretty much cookie cutter. It's the same thing. It's like Walmart here versus Walmart there. It might look a little inverted, and maybe the pharmacy is a little bit further to the left in this one, but they're pretty much all the same. All of these plans are almost exactly the same. They do not deviate depending upon local needs. That's something else that people need to consider. What happened in the New Brunswick election today? Well, the Conservatives lost. The Liberals won. It looks like the Liberals will form a majority government in New Brunswick, beating one of the only premiers who was standing up for parental rights in the last couple of years. The Liberals are elected in 31 ridings. The PCs get 16, and the Greens somehow managed to get two seats in New Brunswick. Okay, this is the BC election. So let's go ahead. This happened on Saturday. Weird that there's an election on Saturday. Who has an election on a Saturday? Usually it's a weekday, right? But in BC, amidst torrential rains and horrible, what do they call it? Atmospheric rivers. It's climate change. Oh my God, go out and vote green because look, the whole place is falling to pieces. It's incredible. This is what it looked like after all of the votes were counted on Saturday night, late Saturday night. The NDP had claimed 46 ridings. Before the election, they had 53, so they're down 7. The Conservatives had 0 MLAs, and now it looks like they've got 45, and the Greens have 2. 93 seats in British Columbia. 46 go to the NDP, 45 go to the Conservative Party, and 2 go to the Greens. So what is this? This means that the NDP, it looks like anyway, depending on recounts, and there will be recounts because there's a couple of ridings for you people who don't vote. I mean, come on. There's a couple of ridings that are within 100 votes, and one riding, I'll show you in just a second. You're going to go, what? Really? Oh, if only I'd voted. Anyway, there's still 49,000 votes. Still 49,000 votes yet to be counted. They're mail-in ballots, apparently, or out of province, or whatever they are. And they didn't get counted, I don't know, for some reason on Saturday night. But the recount doesn't start until this coming weekend. So we have to wait all week with this hung election. And then finally, they're going to do a recount. Now, look at this. This is the riding here. I'm going to go up here. This riding right here. Juan de Fuca Malahat, which is the southernmost riding on Vancouver Island. Dana Lajeunesse of the NDP is leading in that riding, hasn't won, leading in that riding by 20 votes. So they're going to be recounting that. Obviously, that's an automatic recount. And there's another one, I think, where is it? Here. It's somewhere closer to the interior, that the NDP are leading in by less than 100 votes as well. So it's quite possible, although doubtful, but possible that somehow the Conservatives win these two ridings and swing it in their favor, and they'd be up 47-46 over the NDP. But again, the Greens still have those two seats. So that government would be falling in about 3 months' time. We don't know if the NDP are going to be able to form this coalition government with the Greens. If they do, they'll have the majority and be able to govern for the next 4 years, unimpeded by the Conservatives. However, the Conservatives have definitely strengthened their position considerably in British Columbia. So let's have a look at this map here. Look at this. I've always thought the BC looked kind of like a boot. Look at it. Anyway, it's mostly blue, right? So except for this particular area here, what is that? In the Kootenays, for some reason, in the Kootenays, they're voting orange. But look at this. Most of the NDP votes happen on the coast or on the island. So you've got here, here, all up here, North Coast. I think the Sunshine Coast, yeah, voted NDP as well, which really surprises me because that's like a rich part of BC. North Coast. So we got one blue riding here on Vancouver Island, North Island. So while we're sitting here talking about municipal governments and 15-minute cities and all of that, to me, this looks like an incredibly divided province on ideological lines. Don't you think? I mean, if it wasn't for all of these people who live down here in the lower mainland and on the island, and mostly the lower mainland, the Conservative Party would have won that election. But this in the interior, in eastern BC, south, the north, definitely, they want to get rid of the Marxists. Would it be worth talking to your municipal leaders about possibly, I mean, this is untenable. And this is a massive province with 6 million people in it, right? There's 6 million people in British Columbia, nearly. But it's run from here. Do you know how far it is a drive to Kelowna from Vancouver? I think it's about 6 to 7 hours. Or maybe it's longer than that. I can't quite, it's been a while since I've made that drive. Maybe it's a little bit long. Maybe on the Coquihalla now, it's 6 to 7 hours. It's a long ways away. It's like you're living in a different province. And according to this, you are living in a different province. What about these people up here? Everything that happens in British Columbia, it's all about Vancouver, Greater Vancouver, and the island. I think that these people deserve their own constituency of some kind, whether it's joining Alberta or whether it's creating their own province or territory or whatever it is, because you're talking about, Peace River, for example, here being represented by a government that was voted in mostly from people in Vancouver. That's completely unfair. It's centralized governments, which is something that we have been railing against for quite some time. Centralization is no good when you're talking about a very, very large area and large population. We have a new contender for leader of the Liberal Party of Canada. Speaking of BC, former BC Premier Christy Clark says she's interested in replacing Trudeau. The Prime Minister decides he wants to step down. And of course, he's going to have to step down of his own free will, his own volition. He's deserved that. He's earned that, she says. Let's go ahead and read this story from the left-wing Marxist publicly corporate CBC. There's Christy Clark right there. As Trudeau faces a rebellion from his own Liberal MPs in caucus this week, and by the way, that caucus is meeting on Wednesday morning, like they always do. They have their weekly caucus meetings. Trudeau, by the way, wasn't in question period today. I wonder why that is. And I wonder if most of those caucus members were in question period or if they weren't, or what they're doing, how they're plotting, scheming, planning. Can you imagine all the intrigue and espionage that's going on right now in Ottawa? Liberal MPs looking at each other funny. So, Barry, how do you feel about her? I can't hear you. I'm sorry, what? Look, she's talking to so-and-so who's so-and-so and so-and-so. There's a lot of finger pointing, backstabbing. It's like a game of Survivor with 153 MPs in the Liberal Party right now. It's actually quite funny. Former BC Premier Christy Clark is suggesting she would be interested in replacing Trudeau should he decide to step down. In a statement sent to Radio Canada in French, Clark wrote that she was open to returning to public life and would like to be a part of the discussion about the future direction of the Liberal Party and the country. She's 58. She served as premier in BC from 2011 to 2017. Also wrote that Canadians are tired of politicians who think that fear-mongering and divisiveness will win an election and gain power. She added, they also understand that polarized political views are standing in the way of the solutions we need. According to Christy Clark, voters want leaders who will unite our country with practical solutions to the tough challenges we face, the cost of living, the housing crisis. Wait till you see the last line. The need to strengthen our healthcare system and the importance of fighting climate change. I'm sorry, Christy. Your time has expired. It was nice knowing you. So what she's trying to do is peel away conservative voters from Pierre Poilievre. But the second that she brings that up, that climate change thing, people go, I'm sorry, but I'm not interested in listening to you anymore. Because I don't believe that she quite understands. All of these politicians, you see, they live in a bubble. They don't live amongst us. They're not with us. They don't have to go through the same workaday experiences that we do. They don't have to scrimp and save. They don't have to worry about how much money is in their pension, if they can cover all their bills this month, if they're going to be able to put food on the table this weekend. They don't live that way. And so that detaches them from the psyche of people that do, which is the vast majority of us. And that's the problem with politicians. Do they make too much money? I think they do. How do we attract good people to run? Well, it's about wanting to do well for your country and not for yourself. So if you gave a politician, whether it's a federal one or a provincial one, I think the federal MPs, they make $190,000 on top of cabinet appointments and committee appointments and all of that stuff. I mean, most of them are going to be over $200,000 a year. That, to most of us, is completely out of touch, astronomical. I'm sorry, how much you make? And then there's a lot of it that's tax deductible. And they get some pretty wild pensions as well, depending on how long they've been in there. So when you're detached like that from real life, I don't believe there's any real way, unless, of course, you suddenly become poor, to get back into the swing of the average Canadian psyche, no matter where that Canadian happens to live, whether it's British Columbia, Saskatchewan, Ontario, New Brunswick, it doesn't matter. Because we're all feeling that pinch right now. Some of us more than others, but we're all feeling that pinch. Clark's comments come as Trudeau prepares for a heated meeting with his caucus on Wednesday. Some MPs are being asked to sign their names to what amounts to a pledge to stand together and calling for blah, 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 blah. All right, so I'm not going to bother reading the rest of that story to you guys. What I will say is this. There is no way that somebody like Christy Clark would come out and say, yeah, I'd run for the leadership of the Liberal Party of Canada if Justin Trudeau decided to step down, if he's not planning to step down. We hear all kinds of cabinet ministers right now are planning and scheming behind the scenes for their own leadership runs. They're getting their people together, they're building teams, and they want to be able to take over that leadership. They want it. They want it so bad they can taste it. But they'll never publicly tell you that. Well, wait a minute. Christy Clark did today. And who else did today? We've been hearing for how long about Mark Carney maybe throwing his hat in the ring to be the Liberal leader? Well, here's the story from the Western Standard. Carney intends to run for the Liberal leadership. It's the headline. Former Bank of Canada Governor Mark Carbon Tax World Economic Forum Carney confirmed his intention to enter politics, though he remains vague on specifics. Well, if he's vague now, you think he's going to be any more clear when he gets elected, if he gets elected, which I doubt. Carney, who has been advising Trudeau on economic matters, told a fellow Liberal that you can't map these things out when asked about the timing and nature of his political aspirations. Meanwhile, there's speculation that cabinet ministers Francois Philippe Champagne and Melanie Joly, who was accused last week in question period in the House of Commons by Pierre Poilievre of getting her team together and stabbing Prime Minister Trudeau in the back. These two have been discussing potential leadership campaigns with their colleagues, and Christy Clark as well. So there you go. The sharks are circling. There is blood in the water, and I predict, unless, now this is interesting. I don't know. I don't know. Trudeau's ego seems far too large. His hubris far too extensive to step down at the behest of 30 or 40 or 50 lowly backbench Liberal MPs. He's Justin Trudeau. He stands apart. He is the savior. This is all going on in his mind every day, all the time, right? So, will he step down willingly? Or are these people taking a huge chance, the Melanie Jolys and the Francois Philippe Champagnes and the Christy Clarks and the Mark Carneys of the world, by suggesting that they're going to be running for the Liberal leadership, even though there is no official Liberal leadership contest going on at the moment? It's all very interesting. All of this to say that if they do have, and they're going to have a leadership convention, it's going to be divisive and it's going to be ugly and it's going to splinter the party even more than it's splintered right now, which means you can bet that they will lose even more seats than we thought they were going to, which to me is absolutely amazing. Jordan Peterson is considering suing Justin Trudeau. Remember what Trudeau said last week in the Foreign Interference Commission? He said it in French. And I think he says offensive things in French because he doesn't want the rest of us to hear it. But listen to this.
Messages that were transmitted or amplified in that respect. On page 7, there are some screenshots that were shown by the researcher. And could we zoom so that we can see the titles? I know there are quite a few of them there, but I'll read a few of them. In the middle, Canada's Freedom Convoy has perfectly exposed legacy media's conceited bias.
Trudeau is not up to the job, or MEP accuses Canada of human rights violation. Donc, le convoi de la liberté est terminé depuis longtemps, mais
the Freedom Convoy is over, but these messages are still being sent nowadays. Answer: yes. We have seen that anti-vax messages during the convoy and during the pandemic were amplified by Russian propaganda, especially in the media of the right, and it was continued by messages.
So he's calling me and everybody, and I don't think at the time there were many shows like this. There are now popping up all over YouTube, but he was calling me and everybody else Russian funded. Like, we've been getting money from RT, Russia Today, which I don't think you can even get in Canada. And he has no proof to back up any of these claims. But let's continue.
The people who were sharing anti-vax messages, it doesn't mean that there weren't people who were legitimately anti-vax, but that was hugely amplified by Russian propaganda. And once Ukraine was invaded, we saw a lot of those channels become pro-Putin propaganda channels. And as I said, we've recently seen that RT is currently funding bloggers and other YouTube personalities at the right, such as Jordan Peterson, other names that are well known, and Tucker Carlson as well.
All right, so we're gonna leave it there. That's all we need as we go back to this story here. Jordan Peterson denies Trudeau's claim that he's funded by Russia and is considering a lawsuit. He's pushing back, Peterson is, against Trudeau's unsubstantiated claim that he's received funding from the Russian propaganda outlet Russia Today. I don't think that's a propaganda outlet. I think they just deliver the news from their side of things, like any media company does here in Canada or in the United States. Do you honestly think that there's going to be a network in Russia that is pro-Ukraine? I don't think they'd last too long. And I'm not talking about being bombed. I'm just talking about bombing. Wouldn't go over so well with the Russian people. So Peterson says he's considering suing Trudeau for defaming him, despite the burdensome process that filing a lawsuit requires. We don't need to tell you what happened because we just saw it in the video. So neither Peterson nor Tucker were named in the indictment. That indictment of Tenet Media that was apparently taking money from Russia or Russia Today. But that's only one, Lauren Chen and her husband. And then unwittingly, I think it was Dave Rubin and maybe Tim Pool. But I can't be sure. But that was unwitting. And Rubin has already released a statement, so is Tim Pool, about all of that nonsense. So basically what they're doing, what Trudeau and his cronies are doing, is blowing up nothing from nothing. Nothing from nothing leaves nothing. And yet he's under oath or affirmed, sitting on the stand, testifying in front of Canadians in committee last week, lying through his teeth, not just once, but several times over, knowing it can never be proven that he's lying. Well, in this case, this was a subjective lie as opposed to an actual concrete factual lie that he told regarding conservative elected officials being on the list of possible foreign interference candidates. That list of 12 or 11 that we've been hearing so much about for the past year and a half. We'll never be able to prove that he's wrong or lying because we can't see those documents. They're classified, and only those with top secret codes can look at them. And that excludes Pierre Poilievre, by the way. He refuses to get those secret passes and sign that NDA. But anyway, in response, Peterson told the National Post that Trudeau made a false allegation against him and that the Prime Minister should have done his bloody homework. It's a very serious accusation. You should have done your bloody homework. And if you're going to make accusations, you should have at least got them right. I don't think it's reasonable for the Prime Minister of the country to basically label me as a traitor. And I don't find it amusing. That's my best Jordan Peterson. What do you think? Is it passable? I got dragged into this. I don't know, because I haven't been implicated in that even peripherally. But I don't think Trudeau is informed enough to understand what the hell is going on, period. But certainly not in the broader social media space. I hope he does sue Trudeau. Peterson's one, hesitation is, oh man, a lawsuit. I don't want to have to go through a lawsuit. There's so many lawsuits, and it's just expensive and time consuming and soul consuming, gut wrenching. I wonder what the statute of limitations are on filing a lawsuit like that. I would wait until after Trudeau either steps down as prime minister or gets his ass voted out, because then he doesn't have power over all the mechanisms that can shut you down, including judges. And speaking of government, we have another story here for you. This is Jamil Javani. He's the conservative MP from Oshawa, grilling Catherine Tate, the CEO of the CBC, over bonuses. This was today, and this is good. Let's watch.
I'd just ask if you agree with a statement that's been attributed to you. And I'm going to quote, "The defund narrative has picked up momentum especially as it relates to CBC television. Did that come from you?
Yes.
Okay. So that was reported last week by the National Post from an email they obtained from you, and I believe in January 2024. Is that correct?
I presume so, yes.
Okay. So when you look at the concerns over your expenses, right, which I think legitimate concerns over where your personal vacation time ends and where your billable time begins, when you see the concerns over news stories related to your bonuses that are going out and bonuses you may receive or executives receive, the $18 million that we've been talking about today, do you think any of that might contribute to what you yourself have observed as a growing movement to defund the CBC?
I absolutely do not.
Why is that?
Because I believe that having experienced now the third appearance at this committee, I would say that there is a clear effort on the part of members of this committee to vilify and to discredit me and to discredit the organization. Not one question has been asked, excuse me, not one question has been asked about the accomplishments of the public broadcaster over the last 6 years and how we have served
I think our
Canadians.
Liberal colleagues have asked you some of those questions, so I think that's not a fair representation of your time here today. But let's go back to something that our colleague, Mr. Coteau, asked you earlier. You referred to KPIs, key performance indicators. Would the idea that a growing movement in our country would like to defund your organization be weighed into an analysis of key performance indicators and determining whether the discretionary portions of the bonuses that you've acknowledged there is a percentage that is discretionary and not contractually obligated, that those percentages that you might consider, if people don't like what we're doing, if people don't trust us, if people would like the government to take money away from our bloated organization, maybe we shouldn't be spending more of their money than we have to. Is that, could that?
So that was kind of a wordy question for him saying, hey, listen, don't you think if people don't want you guys around and there's a growing movement of people who want you defunded, maybe you'd think twice about how much money you're spending and how frivolously you're spending it?
Not cross your mind in analyzing the KPIs?
We do not take into consideration political wins or influences in determining our business metrics.
So you would call it a political reaction for the average Canadian to hear that you're doling out $18 million in bonuses, that you're billing the taxpayer for your time in Paris while on a personal vacation. That's a political concern that the average Canadian wouldn't have a pure interest in that based purely on the fact that they are giving you their hard-earned money through taxes?
I'm not sure I understand.
Wait a minute. Oh, you got to go look back. Get the look on his face. We're going to go back like, he looks like a Sesame Street Muppet there.
Through taxes?
I'm not sure I understand what
30
you're
seconds.
getting at on this question. I'm
30
sorry.
seconds, please.
You're trying to marginalize legitimate concerns.
So, Jamil, you confused her there. Remember, she's arrogant, thick, and lives in one of those bubbles. One of those above the crowd bubbles. You have to somehow speak to her in her own language.
Abuse of taxpayer dollars and any accountability that we are trying as parliamentarians to introduce here. And you're saying it's purely political. And what I'm saying is the big, beautiful, growing movement to defund the CBC is not a purely political movement, but it is a matter of taxpayer accountability. Can you not acknowledge that?
I will not, Madam Chair, I will not be accused of abusing taxpayer dollars. I'm sorry, for the record. We have managed our budget extremely carefully. We were facing $100 million.
I don't think the Canadian people would agree with you.
Vani, will you allow?
Okay, that's that. So she took a vacation, went to France on our dime, and then has the nerve to say that she has managed the CBC public dollars responsibly. Wow, that's kind of interesting, don't you think? We got a lot to talk about, so we're going to move on. By the way, we have some stuff on the American election and Donald Trump at McDonald's and Kamala losing her mind a little bit at a rally over the weekend, coming up in the extension for all access pass holders after 9 o'clock Central tonight on shadowdavis.com. We're going to try and squeeze everything in before that. 65% of Canadians say there are too many immigrants. 65%. Wow. That's insane. Oh, And I looked earlier today, you know how you get your head up to do something and then you do it, and then something distracts you at the last second and you go, oh, what was that? And then you forget what you're doing. That's what happened to me today when I was looking at how many Indian immigrants have come to Canada in the last few years. I think we're talking about 1.7 million in the last 3 years from India. And they're coming to Canada because of better universities. What I find, no, I'm not going to get into that right now. That's a topic for another time, and probably the extension too, if we talk about immigration, because, you know, it's a very touchy subject. And the reason for that is because anything you say can be soundbited, hacked off, and made to look racist, even though you don't mean it that way. But ultimately, you're worried about your country losing its way, losing its culture, losing its feel, losing itself. How many people yearn for the days where Canada was Canada? Yeah, we accepted everybody. We still accept everybody. But the problem is that you've got a cultural fabric that is wrapped throughout this country. And I can't help but thinking what Trudeau said that was reported, I believe, only in the New York Times before he was even prime minister, and that is Canada will be the world's first post-nation state. Canada does not have a recognizable identity. It's what he said. I'm paraphrasing. I'm not exactly quoting word for word. And when he said it, I remember reading that going, what is he even talking about? What does that even mean? Of course, now we all know. Trying to transform our country into something else. And you can see it in the rhetoric of the Liberal Party if you have an account on X. And if you do, follow me there at Shadow Davis. Follow me on all the social media, by the way, and get this out there. Like and share to as many people as you possibly can. If you're watching on Facebook, if you're watching on YouTube, smash that like button. If you're watching on Twitch or X, get Telegram. It's on Telegram tonight. It's on Rumble as well. Share it. Get it out to as many people as we possibly can. It helps me. It helps the station grow. It helps the show grow. We're talking about immigration, and, you know, it seems like, yeah, I mean, the country has changed. They want us to change. They're transformational change is the rhetoric that Liberal MPs are using all over social media. And I don't recall ever voting for that. Transformational change. Did you ever vote for Canada to be transformed into whatever this is now? And again, I have always said, and I will always maintain, that I have nothing against people. I don't care where they're from or who they sleep with or who they pray to. It does not matter to me. Are you a good person or are you a bad person? That's how I judge people, on the context of their character, not on their skin color or anything else. But when you bring in a certain culture of people en masse to a country and they cloister themselves, they ghettoize themselves into their own little communities, never ever having to really get into the Canadian culture at all because they've developed their own little Indias technically across our country. How is that diversity? And how then can you say diversity is our strength when there is no diversity? It's just a bunch of them over here, a bunch of them over here, us over here, them up. There's no mixing. There's no melting pot. And that needs to change. But when there's so many coming in so quickly, there's no way to direct that. And that's, I believe, why 65% of Canadians are saying there are too many immigrants, according to this poll. New Leger poll. This sentiment, by the way, has been steadily on the rise since 2019. The Leger survey published last Wednesday, was conducted for the Association of Canadian Studies and revealed a rather dramatic national consensus on the issue. Well, just over a fifth of respondents said they thought Canada's immigration levels were about the right number. around 2%, and around 2% said there were too few immigrants. 65% said there are too many. The rise in the extent to which Canadians believe that there are too many immigrants is continuing and is yet again reached a new height. Chief Executive of ACS, Jack Jedwab, told the National Post, virtually no one in Canada currently thinks that there are too few immigrants. He went on to say the findings were unsurprising, given that all recent polling has revealed a persistent and growing dissatisfaction among Canadians on the Trudeau government's immigration targets. Leger conducted a similar poll in 2019, which found just 35% of Canadians thought there were too many immigrants, while 49% thought that it was about the right number. So based upon a poll like this, do you think that maybe, because Poilievre is being very, very careful. Pierre Poilievre is protecting that lead. And I hope this doesn't work out like a hockey game or a football game where your team is leading by 3 touchdowns going into the fourth quarter and you kind of let up. You take your foot off the gas. You start playing kitty bar the door and you stop doing the aggressive stuff. I'm certainly hoping that Poilievre looks at that study and says 65% of people think there's too many immigrants. All right, I can hammer on this now. Because that would go along with everything else he's talking about. Right? That particular policy, he talks about crime, he talks about homelessness. Well, that's all, at least in large part, tied to the fact that there are too many people coming across our borders, legally and illegally, mostly illegally, or they're overstaying their permits. So maybe he steps up and he says, hey, we're going to have to slow this down or stop it. And what I would do, I mean, if you've got 65% of people in this country who think there's too many immigrants, what I would do if I were running, and I'm not, but I would say, you know what? We need a 2-year moratorium. We need 2 years to clean up what we've got going on right now, and we are barring any of this immigration or any of these protected, asylum seekers, refugee, none of that. For 2 years, we are barring that because we've got too much to clean up here. We've got people on wait lists that last for 11 years and illegals running around in this country. We don't even know how many. They say anywhere between 20,000 and 500,000. They don't know. And that was a story that came out a few months ago, and still Poilievre said nothing. Probably based upon the fact that the polls were slow. One thing about polls is they reflect the feeling of people, generally speaking, 6 months ago. That's how it works. It's not right now in the moment because people are completely clued out. What you're going to find when I talk about the number of people who don't vote in elections, let's say, or who go and vote, but they're voting for a color and not a person. They have no idea what any of the issues are. They just go because they're supposed to go, because their mom and dad told them to go, or their husband or wife told them to go. They're clued out. They don't pick up on any of this stuff until they've had a good sit-down talk over beers with their buddies. And that could come 2 months from now, 3 months from now, 2 weeks from now. But on their own right now, maybe their lives are too busy. Maybe they just don't care enough to find out more about what's going on in our country right now. But ultimately speaking, and I found this with radio ratings as well, when I worked in the corporate media years ago, that the ratings reflected what was going on and the polls reflect what's going on 6 months ago, not right now, maybe 3 months, depending upon the subject. But if that's what's going on or what was going on 6 months ago, imagine how people are feeling now. I believe, excuse me, that number is probably higher now. And a poll 6 months from now will confirm that than it was 6 months ago because of all the videos people are seeing online, which is something Trudeau has been trying desperately to shut down for the past couple of years, but he's got different problems now. That's it, you guys, for the social media part of the show tonight. Thank you for being here. Thank you very much. I love you all. I appreciate you all. I will catch you tomorrow night at 8 o'clock Central for another Shadow at Night live stream for all access members. I'll see you for the extension on shadowdavis.com in 2 minutes' time. Don't forget to like and share. Let's get this out there to as many people as humanly possible. I'll talk to you later. Bye for now.